Welcome back to the Blister and Muck podcast. I'm Jenny Mason, your host and the author of the Blister and Muck series. In this episode, Blister goes to the harbor. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, it's a boat time. While there, he's going to meet a couple of birds who they do a lot of listening and watching, and they do something they shouldn't do. As a result, these birds turn out to be pretty important to the story. I'll spare you the details. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I think it's always better to let people discover things on their own. Speaking of discovering things, have you ever wished you could go back in time just to see what the world was like? You know, like, what did the world smell like before soap or bacon was invented? What did it sound like before cars or ukuleles? Writers often ponder these weird questions, and we're kind of like detectives as we go about trying to find the answers. While Blister and Muck shared their story with me, I had to research what the world was like in the 1890s. What kinds of clothes did people wear back then? What foods did they eat? Make no mistake, a lot has changed in 130 years. Perhaps one of the biggest changes has to be the animal world. There were so many more animals back then. For instance, before cars and trains, horses primarily hauled people and goods. As a result, in New York City alone, 150,000 horses clopped along the streets in the 1890s. Imagine what that sounded like. Imagine what that smelled like. Especially considering those horses dropped 3 million pounds of manure every day. The 1890s were also a time with more mammals, amphibians, fishes, reptiles, and birds. Scientists estimate the planet has lost billions of creatures from 1900 to today. The world used to have 187 different bird species. These days, it's closer to about 19 on the whole planet. The other 90% are now extinct. And if extinct is not a word you're familiar with, it just means gone forever. So what did the past sound like? And if we added back all those species, all those billions of birds, and mammals, and amphibians, and reptiles, and fishes, what would the world sound like now? Episode 4, Eavesdropping. In the sloshing green waters of the harbor, a pack of seals bobbed like pepper flecks on pea soup. They watched the come and go of sleek yachts, big-bellied cargo ships, and nimble clippers. Noddies, plovers, terns, kittiwakes, and other snoozy seabirds buttoned along the riggings, ropes, and gunwales of the ships moored along the docks. Albatrosses, frigates, and gulls hovered in the sky like strips of fine paper. The gulls laughed at the dockworkers, hefting barrels and sacks up or down gangways. "Ha! Yeah," the seagulls mocked. Newsboys circulated the docks, hawking papers. One boy waved his newspaper like a flag and shouted, "Extra, extra! Black Rust Mayor to lather lions! Official invitation reprinted on page 4. The gulls laughed at this. "Ha! Yeah. Another boy across the street hopped on his toes and bellowed, "Lion-lathering, huge hoax," says Mayor's office. "Read all about it." The gulls laughed at this too. Small crowds swarmed the newsboys. With a purchased newspaper in hand, they rushed to share the day's headline with friends and neighbors. The small crowds swelled into throngs that now trekked across the city to the mayor's mansion. Whether they believed the event was real or suspected it a hoax did not matter. They were guaranteed to see something of a spectacle either way. All the while, Blister strode between the newsboys and dock workers openly. Rats were as common to harbors as noodles to Italy. No one raised a fuss at the sight of 1 or 50 scuttling along. Wharf rats were another matter altogether, and as far as Blister was concerned, they were something to lift a skirt and scream at. Luckily, wharf rats ventured underground when the sun came up. The macadam avenue led Blister to a rampart made of boulders speckled with white and green seagull splatter art. With their slurpy fingers, the frothy waves stroked the slimy algae beards growing on the hefty stones. Oily black cormorants roosted on the rampart, their dragon wings stretched to soak up the day's fire. At first, Blister scanned the piers and boat slips, searching for Big Jimmy. Then the sound of pigeon burbles lured him to the roof ridge of a nearby tavern. This may surprise you, but pigeons are prime information sources. In truth, these birds are the eyes and ears of the world. Each fledgling is inducted as an officer of the Order of Observers, a worldwide spying network. While pretending to peck about in a dazed, confused, and mostly brainless manner, pigeons have managed to spy on everyone, everywhere. They have always watched, they have always listened. And their cousins, the carriers, spent centuries transporting covert correspondence. Blister navigated around the dormer windows spiked along the sloped tavern roof towards a pair of pigeons. He presumed they spied on the harbor. However, their snorting chortles suggested otherwise. He ducked in the rain gutter and watched. "That one! Go for that one!" said the pigeon with toffee-splotched feathers. "Target acquired," said the other pigeon. His feathers had the color and texture of fish scales. Fish Feathers turned around and hung his posterior off the edge of the building. "Say when." From where he crouched, Blister saw the street teeming with dock workers and porters. He was not sure what the target was until he saw one hatless man shoving an empty wheelbarrow. "Not yet." Toffee Splotch giggled. "Not yet. Not yet. Now!" When the bare-headed man stepped in range, Fish Feathers loosed a dollop of avian gravy. "Bullseye!" Toffee Splotch flapped her wings. Fish Feathers guffawed. "Eavesdropping!" Both pigeons collapsed in a feathery heap of laughter. "Ha! Yeah, 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 yeah!" the gulls contributed. "Hrr, hrr, 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 hrr!" Toffee Splotch hooted. "Droppings! Droppings off eaves!" "So this is what the officers of the order get up to," Blister announced as he came out of hiding. The pigeons jerked upright, initially startled. "You got a problem, Tough Tail." Fish Feathers puffed his chest and strutted around Blister. "I need the scoop on some camouflage traps. Dr. Van Sangfreud's incredible IncarceRATors, to be exact." "Perhaps we know about it, and perhaps we don't," Toffee Splotch said as she preened under her wings. "Perhaps you should procure the fee for our services," Fish Feathers said. "Perhaps you don't want me to report your eavesdroppings to the Grand Feather," Blister said. Both pigeons gulped and ruffled their neck feathers. Fish Feathers recovered first. He jabbed his head at Blister and glared with one eye. "The Grand Feather of the Order of Observers wouldna give a rat the time of day." Blister jabbed his head toward fish feathers. They were so close their eyeballs could have touched. Good thing I'm not asking for the time. Toffee Splotch ended the stare down. Look, she said. Perhaps we can do you a small favor, if you do us one. If you don't tell the Grand Feather about our surveillance on the harbour, then we will tell you what we know of those traps. Deal. Blister crossed his arms and waited. Toffee Splotch eyed Fish Feathers until he backed off. Fine, he exhaled. We don't know anything about any traps. No Dr. Fancy, what have you, traps. Dr. Van Sangfreud, Blister corrected. Sorry, Fish Feathers strutted away. Still nothing. Wait, how can you not know? The Order is supposed to know everything. Toffee Splotch corrected. The Order knows everything of importance. But these are important traps. You can't see them. They're invisible until they snap. Interesting, Fish Feathers mused, only he did not seem interested at all. For all we know, Blister said, there could be invisible Dr. Van Sangfreud pigeon traps all over the city. Both birds fluffed and molted. We'll look into it. Promptly. Much obliged, Blister smiled. You can find me at the old cathedral. Now, what about this lion washing at the mayor's house? Invitations went out across Blackrust, telling everyone to attend the spectacle, Toffee Splotch answered. Apparently, the mayor keeps a pack of lions as pets, and every year he has a lion washing celebration. There's a band and a feast, and that can't be true. I've never heard of it. Blister was up to date on all free food events. Of course it's not true, Fish Feathers scoffed. It's an April Fool's gag. It's all hubbub, no suds. Clever, said Blister. Who made the fake invites? What do we look like? A crystal ball? Toffee Splotch fluffed for flight. Aye, that's enough free information for one day. Fish Feathers led the way up in a flicker of wings. Satisfied that the pigeons would uncover the information he wanted, Blister resumed his search for Big Jimmy. The tiny shrew supervised a mixed pack of rats and mice thieving all manner of goods from the cargo hold of a ship. With a whistling voice, Big Jimmy told Blister about a Siberian bear recently shipped to Blackrust. Through various black market negotiations, the bear wound up with a whipcracker who made the animal dance in costumes. Blister's job was to bust the dancing bear from bondage and smuggle it onto the 4:30 train bound for the great redwood forests out west. If the bear missed that ride, they'd have to wait a month for the next westward iron horse. Operatives were stationed in the caboose. They would travel with the bear and help it make a new home in the redwood wilds. According to Big Jimmy, the train conductor promised to keep the caboose off limits to passengers. That humans were involved did not surprise Blister. Madame Petresca possessed excellent penmanship. She kept regular correspondence with a wide audience of people who all assumed she was a person with teeny-tiny handwriting. Big Jimmy gave Blister the location where the bear usually performed, and then made it clear with squeaking sighs that he was very busy. Blister took the hint and hurried off. On his way out of the harbor, he passed a rowdy circle of bilge rats tossing dice. When they weren't idling about, bilge rats were usually up to no good. Too lazy to groom, their fur was always matted and mangy, and the gaps between their teeth were jellied with bits of half-chewed grub. A bilge rat clicka-clacka cradled the dice and tossed them on the ground. "Bones! Bones! Bones! Skull! Bones!" The group cheered. The opponent clicka-clacka-clacka-clacka cradled his dice. "5 skulls again!" the loser moaned. "Another deplorable disaster! A grievous gamble! A jinxed gem. Blister stopped. He recognized that voice. Oh no! A pack of gambling bilge rats. I can think of only one thing worse than that. A cheetah playing poker. Tune in again next week to find out what happens. What are the odds Blister will intervene? Wanna bet he minds his own business? I suppose we shouldn't rule it anything out. You can always head over to blisterandmuck.com and use the contact form to let me know what you enjoyed in this episode, what surprised you, and what you think will happen next. Everyone can support the show by sharing it with friends on social media. If you're in a position to give financially, just click Support the Show at blisterandmuck.com. Donations cover the costs of sound effects, music, and the online storage, which makes episodes available on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Deezer, and just about anywhere you get your podcasts. Special thanks to composer Roland Rudzaitis for serving up the Blister and Muck theme song. Pond 5 provided stock sound effects. Daniel Simon brought the seagulls. As always, I'm grateful for my family, friends, and fans. One for one, and all for you.